Hello, everybody. How you doing? This is Patrick J. Brown. Welcome to the Change Matters podcast. I'm your change architect. Thank you so much for connecting. Let me know if you're out there. Good evening, everybody. If you're out there on YouTube, wherever you are, please let me know that you're there. Please like and share. Let's get the likes up. Let's get the subscriptions up. Please let me know that you're there. Looking forward to our dialogue tonight. You know, the whole focus behind our podcast, of course, is Change Matters. Conversations and creative spaces. If you want to change the nature of a thing, change the direction of a thing, you want to be able to change the conversation and change those who join that dialogue. Why? Because if you don't tell your story, you know somebody else will, right? So thanks for being on. Let me know where you're from. Hey, Daphne, how you doing? Thanks for coming on Living in Faith every day. Hello, hello. Man, Apostle Carrie, thank you so much for being on. Cheryl, hello. Good evening. Pamela, Hope, good to see everyone. Monique, good to see you. Everyone, thank you so much for coming on. Please like and please share, and let's have our baskets ready to receive content. Thank you so much for being on. Charlisa, thank you for being on. Anyone else that's out there, let me know that you're here tonight. I'm excited because I'm just so grateful for the dialogue we've had. Of course, you know, we all celebrate our history, and specifically February being Black History Month. Hello, Ravella. Thank you for being on. I want to encourage everyone to ensure that you're documenting your history. You know, because if you don't tell your story, somebody else will. And all history ends up being revisionist history, because many times people will revise your story, And so it's important that we document our story. It's important that we really ensure that we're telling it in the way that we need to. And so this evening, I have a very important guest with me this evening. I'm so excited about having him on. Bishop Johnson has been a mentor of mine well over 10 years. He's evolved into an incredible friendship. He is an organic intellectual, an incredible scholar. He is the presiding bishop of the Bethel Fellowship of Visionary Churches and founding and senior pastor of the House of the Lord in Akron, Ohio. And we're going to talk about his new book, his latest book, The African American Struggle for Identity, The Struggle for Somebodyness. Now, I'm looking forward to this conversation. I got an opportunity to take a look at the book prior to its publication. I was privy to some of that content, and I'm so excited now that it is out. You can order it on Amazon and all the other bookstores online as well. And so we're grateful to have him on. I think it's important that we have this conversation because of the nature of our world, what we are experiencing globally and specifically here. And so I think it's important that these kinds of conversations take place so we can have that dialogue. But before we go, I want to do a fun fact Black History moment right in my own backyard. I wonder who this could be. Well, you know what? I'll share it with you when we get back. And we'll talk a little bit more with Bishop Johnson when we get back. So excited. So again, please tag your friends, let them know you're ready, and let's connect. See you in a moment. Hello, Bishop. How you doing?
What's up, Apostle? I'm doing pretty good.
So glad to have you on. So glad to have you.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
This has been a critical time for these types of conversations. I think the last podcast we had an opportunity, we were talking about care and grief, pain and stress, especially during the pandemic.
Yes, sir.
And we had some incredible conversation together. And I'm so grateful that you're back with me discussing your book and, you know, just really diving into that. So for those of you that don't know, Bishop Johnson has been such a stalwart in the kingdom of God, a standard bearer in the kingdom of God, someone who has been a teacher, an organic intellectual, a scribe, and I can call Bishop my friend as well.
Amen. And, absolutely.
So grateful to have you on. So let's dive right in to the conversation. I want to start out though with why, the African American struggle for identity, the struggle for somebodyness, and why right now.
Well, one of the things that kind of sparked this was at church. I was dealing with people, and particularly young people, and the question keeps coming up: how can you be Christian and Black at the same time? Christianity has been so whitewashed, had such a white influence, foundation, perspective, that a lot of times when African American youth leave the church and go to college, they begin to face all of these questions and perspectives and whatever, and the church has not prepared them. So they almost end up, many of them, walking away, and particularly as they become get introduced to Black Muslims and they begin to question, Christianity as a white man's religion. And I had to come and say, okay, well, you do know that Christianity was on the earth 600 years in Africa before Islam was even conceived. You do know that, right? And most people don't know that.
Right.
And so they have this perspective that Christianity is white. It is not. And to begin to address that so that we don't lose our young people and not preparing them to have these kind of conversations in the Ivy halls of schools, I thought I better do something because there's just not much there that addresses from that perspective.
That is important because, as we think about, growth and development and intellectual insight, if we don't possess the critical thinking capability, then we're not going to ask the questions. It's important that we ask those questions, but also question the answers that are given to us.
Absolutely.
As it relates to what you're talking about. And so that it's important specifically because we know that race is a construct. So because it is an invention or a human construct, then would it be fair to say that constructs need to be deconstructed?
Absolutely. And in fact, a lot of the things that we are talking about, African American history and African Americans have always had a certain kind of skepticism about the way that they take information and deal, because from the very beginning, we were taught from the Bible and taught that slavery was a biblical concept and that this is what you ought to submit yourself to. And so we have to operate from a skepticism, deconstructing ideas that were given to us. And it's remarkable that we were able, even though many of us could not, able to deconstruct what was shared to us from a gospel perspective and say, that's not the truth. The Bible does not teach that. And to come away with a new perspective of Jesus, a new perspective of the gospel, which, by the way, Europeanism has attempted from the beginning to teach us that that's wrong. It's not wrong. It's a different perspective, an African perspective, an African American perspective, and Ubuntu. I've been working on my African right now, a collectivistic, interdependent perspective that is not European, it's not Greek, it's not Western, which, by the way, the Bible isn't either.
Correct. And yet people still think it is. And unfortunately, it's been used in a way that's decolonized the African mind, specifically during the enslavement of people, and how religion itself gets used from that perspective. I mean, even if you look at the Negro Bible or the Slavery Bible, in that particular translation, they removed any references to freedom and liberty in Christ, which is the essence of the gospel, right? In Luke 4, when Christ began to say, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, it was a message of liberty. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. The Lord is that Spirit, the truth shall make you free, right? And Absolutely. As a result of that, that colonizing of the text, then based upon their that Europeanized, Westernized type of hermeneutics, they removed references to freedom and liberation. Absolutely. I find it very rich.
It is very rich. And once we begin to get into the perspective that you're talking about and begin to see that there are lenses, cultural, colonial, Western, Greek lenses that we look through, and that filter our ability to be able to even see what we see, then we need to understand that we need to try to go back and see what the original texts say when God was writing to the original people at the original time about an original subject, and then come forward rather than attempting to take what's been filtered many times. Eugene Peterson said something that I think is so powerful. He said that many times when we're having a conversation, people are coming to the conversation at 11 p.m. to a conversation that began at 8 a.m. And so what we are often doing is attempting to have a conversation at 11 p.m. and discuss things, and yet we don't understand the foundation and the history of what's been going on for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's amazing how much conversation has been missed. To use that analogy, it's amazing to find out what's been discussed, and then the psychological emancipation that needs to take place because of whatever conversations were taking place, but also how that's been passed on from generation to generation. And so we come to this point in history where your book comes forward for us, the African-American struggle for identity, the struggle for somebodyness. Can you tell us a little bit about why you wrote this book and the impetus of its intent?
Well, one of the things that's always going to be going on for African-American people is a struggle. We are trying to find our identity, and our identity is being, let's use that same metaphor, filtered through various perspectives, filtered through teaching that I've gotten in school that is white. By the way, I happen to be in Florida right now, and Governor DeSantis has blocked the teaching of African-American history in the school on the pretext of critical race theory, that therefore it should not be taught. At the same time, people who are not living here may not know that a bill has been put forth by someone, I believe it is in Congress, that we should teach Asian history. And nobody's having a problem. Everybody's on board. Let's teach Asian history. Now, how can we teach Asian history? It's okay. But it's not okay to teach African-American history, because African-American history, as you said, they want to revise it and take out all of the negatives and all of the things that have taken place. There's no critical race theory being taught in schools. We don't even know what critical race theory is. But African-American history tells a lot of things, and the stories that, as you said so eloquently, and when we began, I have a saying that comes from Brene Brown. She says stories are sacred, and story be treated as such. And so I believe that the stories are very, very critical. But guess what? Who tells your story, how they tell it, where they tell it, determines a lot about how you see yourself. And so often we are attempting to create an identity using a false narrative or a false picture or a false image. There is no history about the lions in the Colosseum because the lions couldn't write. It's about the gladiators. It's not about all the other nations who perhaps perished there. It is about those who had the ability to control the narrative of what was going on. That doesn't mean there weren't other narratives. It doesn't mean that other narratives were not important, but they did not have the ability to control their narrative. So we're dealing with identity. Let me just drop one more idea I think is really important. I've been going back to school in psychology, and I'll probably never finish because I lost a lot of credits and stuff, but that's okay. I'm studying anyway. And I took a class on lifespan. And one of the things that dawned on me that I thought was so powerful, Apostle, is we are seeking and trying to construct our identity in every lifespan. That means toddlerhood, childhood, young adulthood, middle age, senior. We are seeking to, each one, you would think, well, I know who I am now. Each lifespan, we are seeking to come up with an identity. So as a toddler, I'm trying to figure out who I am. Why I can't do what I want to do, why they won't let me go in the refrigerator. As a senior, I'm trying to create my identity still, why they're taking things away from me, why they still won't let me go in the refrigerator, but now from another perspective. So I have these identity construct moments throughout life. Doesn't mean anything's wrong with me. It means that as a part of a meaning making reality, I have to make meaning out of my reality. I am seeking an identity. So I said, if that's the case, I need to help people begin to seek an African American identity, because that's the identity that will bring us resilience.
Yes.
I've read 2 books or a paper and a book lately on resilience from a South African scholar. That's just powerful, because we need to find out where is resilience for us. And resilience for us is in our African American identity.
Absolutely. And I think it's important, even when we look at the narratives of the griots, the storytellers within African culture, that emerged, even though at that time, because of being enslaved people, we didn't read necessarily the English language, but yet the griot, the storytelling, then from the storytelling, other languages came that we created, the Gullahs of the world, the Creoles of the world. Then as that began to emerge, then the sorrow songs began to emerge. And then from the sorrow songs where we told the story, then we began to write the Negro spirituals. And then from the Negro spirituals, of course, we've got jazz and we've got blues and we've got gospel and we've got soul. And the original music came from those that told the story. And so as a result of that, we need to embrace everything that comes from our African identity.
Yep.
And if we don't tell our story, and if we don't document our story, then we'll disseminate something else that lacks our identification. And one of the things I appreciate about what you wrote in your book, specifically, there was a section that you talked about Dr. King's message and his speech regarding the somebodiness. And can you elaborate on that foundation and tie that into what you just shared with us?
Absolutely. Thank you. Dr. King talked about, and we don't need to give the whole quote, but he just talked about the importance of somebodiness in the African American church and experience. We may not be anything at work. We may not be anything at school. We may not be anything at some other places, but in the church, I'm somebody.
Yes.
And so I need to figure out in Christ what my somebodiness is all about. And so that becomes very critical to us. And I don't think sometimes that we understand it, why people come to church and all of a sudden dress up, why they come to church and seem to feel important. Why? Because their somebodiness is being exhibited, is being lifted up when you're in church. Yeah, on the street, I'm so-and-so, but at church, I'm deacon so-and-so. That might not mean a lot to you, but it means a lot to me, because in Jesus, I find out who I am. In him I live, in him I move, and in him I have my being. So somebodiness is a very critical perspective. And I think I need to say here early on that I'm not attempting in the book to lift the African perspective or African construct of Christianity or African American perspective of the Black church above the white perspective. I'm just trying to get it in equal hearing, because it's not getting an equal hearing. It has been put down and treated as untrue, as ancient, as there's something that's wrong with it, that is undeveloped, that is ignorant, that is all of those kinds of things, when in fact, the Africans were very, very much developed.
Absolutely.
And most of the knowledge that we have in America comes from Africa, and yet we've not been taught that. And so somehow we believe that where we've come from and all of the knowledge comes from Europe rather than from Africa. And that's a misnomer.
Right. And that would include science, religion, philosophy, so much that we have to, encourage us to continue to do that. Unfortunately, if we let somebody else build our world, they'll always build it too small.
Absolutely.
And so it's important, and it'll be very myopic, because whatever people can commodify, they can control it. And so, at that moment, during those times of where people were enslaved, what ended up happening is that the commodification of Christendom or Americanized Christianity or I would even say empirical Christianity, because it was used as an empire, emerged to the point where our Africanness began to be, I would say, perhaps it was not as strong as it needed to be, clearly, because that was the only institution that rid people of languages, families, of the whole economics behind it, and then the power of religion being used to commodify and colonize and control minds. And so that's what took place. It's even interesting. I love what you said about the equal hearing part, because what that does is it causes us to have dialogue and discourse where perhaps in this nation we weren't included in the conversation.
Absolutely. And it's time for us to come to the table, to talk, to share our stories, and to come into constructs and places where we have been feared. I deal a lot in the white community, and I love my white brothers and sisters, but there are constructs and places where you can't talk because I'm afraid of you. Uncomfortability is not danger. And a lot of times I have to explain that to people because they,
that's good.
I feel uncomfortable. Are you gonna do something to me, or are you, because you raise your voice, or I say, listen, you're safe, but you're not gonna be comfortable. You're safe. I'm not gonna attack you or do anything. But the way that I talk, the way that God created me, the history and the heritage from which I come from, I'm going to display, because God has given me that in order to enrich the cultural fabric of this world. That's the reason why I'm here.
Yeah. And so therefore you're uncomfortable with particular systemic or systematic theologies. You're uncomfortable with my homiletics. You're uncomfortable with the way that I worship. You're uncomfortable with all these different expressions. And I love that you shared it. That's a nugget for me tonight. That doesn't mean that you're not safe, and it doesn't mean that you're in danger. It just means that perhaps you are so myopic into what you want to advance that it's very difficult for you to have a both and mentality. And of course, we know that comes from Greek thinking, because it's very dichotomous, right? Yep. And so it's about knowledge versus evolving and growing and demonstrating transformation. And, even as we were preparing, I was thinking about our conversation tonight. If I want to do a brief exercise, if I Google the word Jesus and bring up images, right?
Sure.
Then I'm just going to share my screen here. I Google it, and it's interesting what comes up. Let's bring this up. And I go to images. And what do I see? Something that does not even represent my identity. I just want to see live with this. Yep. Bishop, what are your thoughts on just?
Yeah, I touch on in the book because I've seen this image of Jesus over and over again, and I don't know how I fell upon this. I think I was studying and going back into the early church and seeing were there images of Jesus, and for the first 230 or so years, there were no images of Jesus. There were no pictures, there were no anything of him. And I believe God allowed that because he didn't want us focused on the image of Jesus as much as the character of Jesus. But in 1940, a man by the name of Solomon created an image of Jesus that has been the most used image in the world. It's been copied billions of times. Thanks for putting it up. And it was created for Sunday school material. And so that has been shown to people over and over and over again. You go to people's churches and even pictures of Jesus are white. And that has a tremendous impact upon our ability to conceive Jesus, upon our psyches, upon our impact of our self-images, all of those kind of things. And so in the first building that we built, we had a image in the back of the baptistry of kind of empty tomb. Once again, we focus on the cross. We don't focus on the empty tomb. We focus on Christ's crucifixion, but not on his resurrection. And in that picture, There is just a short little image, not a full face anything of Jesus. But I said, make it dark. Because who was Jesus? From an ethnic perspective, he was a man of color, probably short and stocky. Probably. We know these things because we know the kind of the ethnicity of people who come from that particular part of the world in that time period. He's a person of color. Now, I ain't trying to make him black. Some people go all the way. Well, he was African. No, he wasn't African. He was circum-Mediterranean. But those are people of color. And we don't want to face that. People don't want to talk about it. And most of the Bible, now when I say this, don't shout me down. People start to have problems. Most of the people in the Bible are not white.
Absolutely.
They're people of color. They're people around the circum-Mediterranean or the Mediterranean basin. They're people of color. Europe has not even come into its heyday yet. So a lot of people don't understand that. That doesn't mean that there weren't people of ethnic descent who would become white one day, but the construct of white has not even begun. It has not even started. And people are usually shocked because why? If you look up and use any of the dictionaries, concordances, those kinds of Bible tools, North Africans are treated as white.
Yes.
Without us knowing it.
Yep.
Augustine, Tertullian, a number of these Greek, we would call them Greek church fathers, they're from North Africa.
Absolutely.
Where is North Africa? I usually, to do this, people laugh at me. I say, it's in Africa. Not in Europe. It's not in America. It's in Africa. And the African people there are people of, if we're going to use those ethnic determiners, of Negroid descent. They are dark-skinned people. Now, there are some infiltration later on, and they become more European and more Asiatic. That begins to happen. And then we look at Egyptians now, and they tend to be more a mixture of Asian and European and African. But these people were African. We can go back and look at the history and see. And the Bible is full of that kind of stuff, and we just skip it. When it begins to talk about certain people, the names of these particular ethnicities mean black, dark-skinned. So you can call them what you want. It is certainly an anthropomorphic ethnocentrism to reject back into the biblical text.
Yes. Yeah, and that's the
determiners. That we shouldn't do that because they weren't black. I mean, they weren't African American. They weren't white. Those are modern American constructs.
Yes, and again, those constructs go back to commercialization, and commercialization is for marketing. It is for a campaign, and so these particular images end up becoming graven images, and graven images become icons, and then we have to become iconoclastic. So, why do we become iconoclastic? We do that so that we can deconstruct which has been constructed to enslave, so people can move into spiritual as well as psychological emancipation. And so, it's interesting that these types of pictures and images are disseminated as if Christ is made in their own image, right? And I think that really it muddies the waters of true, if I can use a term, Christian or Christ-centered anthropology, right?
Yes.
And so I think that it's important that we're able to deconstruct that as well as move the conversation forward so that people can be liberated from within with truth, because we know that's what's going to cause people to be set free. One of the things that you also share in your book, Bishop, you talk about the aspects of myths about indigenous African religion. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that, if you can elaborate a little bit more on that part, as far as the myths and how perhaps people have been miseducated concerning that.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Thank you for the question. It's very interesting how our perception of African religion revolves around heathenism,
Mm-hmm.
revolves around animalism, and things of that nature, as if it is totally idolatry, has nothing to do with any real substance of God or Christianity. And that simply is not true. And what has
Mm.
happened is that people have parroted certain kinds of teaching where it has become axiomatic that Christians or that Africans had no concept of a monotheistic God when in fact they did. When we talk about ancestors, for example. If you go in the Bible and you were looking at it and we weren't so brainwashed by the way we look at the Bible, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, if you look at that, they were treated almost as if they were idols.
Mm-hmm.
And ain't nobody having a problem. Ain't nobody saying, "Oh, Christianity is has idolatry in it," because the way they treat Abraham, Isaac, and the way Africans treat their ancestors is the way the Israelites treated Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They are not worshiping them as if they are the only God. They are
Yeah.
worshiping them because they represent a culture, a part of the reality of who God is and how God manifests himself through certain people. So what has happened is we tend to be have been taught that Christianity is animalistic and various things, but that's because many of those sources are not referencing the Africans themselves, but what
Mm.
somebody has again put together, perceived,
Mm-hmm.
think that
Culture.
Africans. So one of the things that I've done is try to go in as much as I can, and I can't do it really because I don't have the skill, but at least I'm going to try to become respectful of African thought about Christianity, not white, European, or even African American transposed thought, what I think
Mm-hmm.
they believe, what I think they think. Well, let's ask them.
Right.
Why impose what we think when we can simply ask some of the African American Christians and those who are African American Christian historian or African Christian historian, what do you believe? And then believe them.
Mm-hmm. That's so powerful. That is why ethnography, grounded theory, different qualitative approaches to research are so important, that we embrace those methodologies, as a normative to preserve. Because, without preservation, then we'll have false dissemination.
Yep.
And then as a result of that, you have masses and herd mentalities with misinformation and disinformation. And I think your book helps us go back to, I would say, even a reverence and an appreciation and an affirmation for a proper historical view.
Yeah, and I think you're summing that up so beautifully. We have to have a reverence or at least a respect for
Yes.
our own perspectives. When you live in a world like America and you've been put down for so many times in so many ways through slavery, Jim Crow, prison fare. I call it prison fare, the new Jim Crow, which puts people in prison because you are black and have that impact, and for hyper ghettoization, the fact that we've been shunted into ghettos all over America, that after a while you don't even respect your own ideas, your
Mm-hmm.
own identity, because it has been so assailed, so attacked, so reformed that you can't even accept it yourself.
Mm. And so, as a result of that type of lack of respect and not really affirming who we are, I think that we can lose, even what I've seen in your book, we can lose our sense of identity by doing that, because, it all starts with an idea, right?
Yep.
Then that idea impacts our identity. Then that identity part impacts how we implement. Then that implementation, impacts how we innovate. It goes on and on and on and on from one seed. And, all we know is all we've learned. And so you can't know what you haven't learned. So, you know, a lot of what we know is really interpreted by ignorance.
Yep.
And, or, you know, so it's important that we have this awareness, that we have some insights, that we have pliability in order for us to be able to awaken ourselves to this perspective of liberty and freedom with this message of identity.
Yeah.
I'm loving this, Bishop. This is so
Well, let
powerful.
me hit another point right here, because I want to get in trouble tonight. So they'll
Go
be
ahead,
leaving
get
me
in trouble.
alone. So one of the reasons that I wrote this is the more research I did, the more I began to see that our identity is situated in Pentecostal perspectives and Pentecostal motor behaviors. Well, once again, when people begin to talk about that, they're like, you know, well, I don't do tongues, and I don't do this, and I don't do that, because they think that we are talking from a construct that is attempting to overthrow or undermine American objective fundamentalism. That's not my goal at all.
Right.
I'm not concerned about. What I'm concerned about is that there is a Pentecostal, and when I say Pentecostal, I'm not using the term in terms of the American Pentecostal movement, but the spirited perspective that we bring with us from Africa that have to do with the ring dance, that have to do with call and response, that have to do with drumming.
Can I respond to you?
Yes, sir. Come on. So, which are a part of which we bring with us, and now having been, you said it, enculturated, we have no need for anymore. I don't need that. I mean, you know, I don't do that anymore. We don't. Well, what are you doing? And where is your identity being drawn from? You've been there, Possum.
You know, it's powerful. You know, oh gosh. You know, I think about how even in therapy now and psychological practices, they have tapping, and, you know, to help people deal with anxiety, to deal with trauma, and it's in, you know, trauma, excuse me, and how we have always been people of movement. We've been people of rhythm. We clapped our hands. There's a call and response. There's a symbiotic relationship between the preacher and the parishioner. There's this symbiosis between artist and audience. And so I think what you're helping us see is for us not to negate it. And again, these things precede Protestantism. And, you know, it precedes orthodoxy.
Yep.
Right.
Absolutely.
So it's resident in that, in this understanding that we have been created in the image and after the likeness of I am, of God. And as a result of that, then we want to be able to embrace what that is. I love how you're
no, that's powerful, the way you're saying it. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna get in trouble tonight. I must be tired or something. I'm getting in trouble. I think that when you look at the cultures of the world, that God created us in certain ways with certain strengths in order to bring those that cultural diversity and those strengths into the world. So when I think of Europeans and their objective, or those things that flow at least from the Greek perspective, the rationalism and the things that flow there,
Platonic thought,
there's a strength there,
Aristotelian logic,
and we can acknowledge that strength and celebrate it. When I think of American Indians and their spiritism, the fact that they're very heavy into looking at alternate states of consciousness and spirit guides and whatever. Well, some of us, we can't handle that. I don't know what to do with that. Well, we don't have to let it take us away from God, but we can let it inform us of different pathways in order to connect to that which is numinous. I feel like I'm getting in trouble here. That which is God and beyond. Well, African Americans, I'm going to make the statement to that. I don't know if I've ever heard anybody really say it this way, but African Americans have a strong emotional base. Now, it's not emotionality. It's not emotion for emotion's sake, but it is the emotional construct that gives us the strength of resilience that makes us who we are. And we should not be ashamed of our emotion and the way that God has created us. And because you are emotional, or you're using that part of you, does not mean you are not objective. Let me give you a quick example. When I go to the movies and I just went to see Quantumania,
Mhm.
Ant-Man and the Wasp. I know that nothing upon the screen is real. It's all a part of Hollywood. Yet,
Mhm.
I don't let my mind lead the experience. I let my emotions lead the experience. And I enjoy everything up there. And I am not tricked. I still know that even though I might be crying, it's not real.
Mhm.
It is a depiction of reality. But I let my emotions lead the experience. When I come to church, I let my emotions, I ought to at some point,
Come
lead the
on, sir.
experience, not just my objectivity lead the
Uh-huh.
experience. It is a relationship with God, not simply a class. If it's just a class, let's get rid of the organ, let's get rid of the piano, let's get rid of the tambourine, let's just set up desks and we'll sit there and just learn. That's an educational environment. We're not coming to church to just be educated. We're coming to worship. And
Uh-huh.
worship is an experience and a
Uh-huh.
relationship, which entails that I use my emotion, but my emotion does not cancel my objectivity.
And there it is. As we used to say, I wouldn't want to serve a God I couldn't feel sometime. Yeah.
Sometimes, every now and then.
Every now and then. We might be 5% Pentecostal tonight.
Yeah,
But it's important because again, being emotional is not emotionalistic. It doesn't mean that we are being ruled by emotion. It means we are engaging the totality of our human experience.
yes, sir.
And so if I'm denying my emotion, just like if I'm denying my intellect, my rationale, my logical capability, my critical thinking, then does that mean if I deny those things, then I'm also denying what makes me who I am? Well, part of
Absolutely.
the African American experience, particularly in the worship experience, that part of us inherently helps us understand the image and likeness of God that has been deposited within us. And
Absolutely. You hit that
mm,
all on the head. At another time, since we always, you and I do this, we need to have a discussion that deals with emotion and the fact that emotions are the things that move us.
mhm,
We have been sold a bill of goods that I can think my way into this and think my way out of it. But thoughts are often not intentions, and thought often doesn't move us. It gives us perspective and
mm,
gives us stories by which we make sense out of our reality, but may not move us to do anything. Emotion, move. What moves us are emotions, even though we're just on the outside, have not begun to
mhm,
really entertain this. And the psychologists are now really, and psychiatrists are really beginning to move into effective psychology, dealing with the
mm.
emotion, the psychology of emotion, and how emotions impact us. And we have been doing that for hundreds of years. We brought it with
Generations,
us from Africa.
generations, absolutely generations, not solely cognitive, right? Not solely
Absolutely.
behavioral, but looking at the emotive aspects of who we are. I mean, even Christ was moved with compassion.
Moved.
Jesus wept.
Yep.
Isaiah teaches us that he was acquainted with grief, had a relationship with emotion and relationship with suffering. And yet we want to deny that in the worship experience because it appears if it's brown and black theologically, then it's not sound in some narratives. And it's unfortunate.
And
But you're freeing
Apostle,
us, sir. Mm,
You're saying something very important, because one of the things that is overlooked once you put on these objective lenses is that
mhm.
the Hebrews are a very emotional people.
Yes.
I mean, it comes out in the text over and over again, and we skip that. We don't
Mm.
want to see them as emotional. We want to see them as objective, as Greeks.
Yes.
When I share this with
Didactic.
people, yeah, they are very messed up because they treat Paul as a Greek. Paul is not a Greek.
Not at all.
Paul is a Hebrew, religious person. He never mentions Aristotle, never mentions any of the Greek
Plato,
philosophers, Plato, or any of them,
Socrates.
nor Socrates, nor attempts to teach anything like that.
Yes.
He's a Hebrew religious. I almost want to call him a revolutionary, because he's bringing some thought that the whole Israelite perspective and religious culture they're gasping at, oh my God, what are you saying? What you know, we don't have to go to the synagogue. I mean, and they just are messed up at how Paul comes about with certain things, but he is not Greek. The
Correct.
Bible is not Greek.
I think about that when he's in Ephesus and he starts talking about before the foundations of the world and you know, you were chosen and here's where you are. And he's speaking to a culture that worshiped the goddess Diana. You know, they had a pantheon of gods. They're you know, polytheistic people. He comes in there, and many times when there's a revelation, if there's not a revelation, then perhaps there's revolution in the sense that people want to overturn the things we've been counting on. Yep. And I think that happens first in our emotions and our thinking and our theology and our concepts. And your book has helped us with that. And I'm so grateful that you've been able to share that with us this evening. What else would you like to share as far as just any main points in your book? And I want to encourage everyone, again, I am with Bishop Joey Johnson. He is the author of The African American Struggle for Identity, The Struggle for Somebodyness. Please, you can purchase his book at all online and in-person bookstores. Please feel free to go to Amazon or whichever you order your books and get this. This is an incredible read. I think it's good for group discussion. I think it's important that we, you know, and especially in the world we're in right now, let's take back our education by preserving and telling our own stories and not allow ourselves to be victims of revisionist approaches that we created, that we continue to be griots, that we tell the stories, that we share the narratives so that we can write the perspectives that were wrong. So, but tell us a few more in our last few minutes here. Any particular other highlights from your book that you'd like to share with us before we close out tonight?
Thank you, Apostle. In closing, I think what I'd like to say is that the world appears to be at this particular time going backwards in terms of its perspective of discrimination and those kind of things. And I'd like to highlight a word there in the title, the struggle. I think that it's easy right now to become discouraged. That when you look at still police treatment, when you look at the pushback upon critical race theory, when you look at the evangelical world's pushback upon woke and woke theology and things of that particular nature, it's easy to get discouraged and to say, you know, what does it matter? But we are in a struggle. And that struggle is right. And we ought to continue that struggle and continue to be encouraged to struggle for our identity, to struggle to have a viable place in this world and not to give up because it is right and because God has granted us that privilege. And so I want to just encourage people, don't give up. Don't quit the struggle. Don't turn back. We're going to continue to move on. Even if we have to face some discrimination, I'm going to use your word, some suffering. Even if we have to face some suffering, you cannot jump from the promised land or from Egypt to the promised land. You've got to go through the wilderness. You've got to go through some suffering in order to get where we need to go. Don't start. We can't preach here right now, but I feel something right there.
That's all right, sir. We got to go from our Negro spirituals. Hey, give me that old time religion.
That's right. You got to go through something.
Yeah.
And we are learning that. We are relearning it. We have to go back, and some of these things we have to reinitiate, relearn, reboot, and that's okay.
That's good. Bishop, this has been rich and hearty. I want to encourage everyone, let's not absorb what we observe. I know there's much that's going on in the world that we're in, but let's observe it, but not absorb it. Let's look at it, but not internalize it. Let's begin to review it, but yet let's not inhale it. We can breathe. I know we say we can't breathe, but we can breathe. And we have inspiration from Holy Spirit to be able to be who we are because we've been created in the image and after the likeness of God. And so this has been a rich conversation, Bishop Johnson. I am so grateful. I'm so looking forward to some further dialogue. So we need to plan something else. Hopefully the audience wants to hear more from Bishop. And this has been great. I'm always enjoying our dialogue. I mean, this is how we are anyway. You know,
this is what we do. They call it iron sharpening iron.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm so grateful for that. I do want to just give a few announcements before we close out. For everyone that's viewing us again, Bishop Johnson, please feel free to order his book. Again, The African American Struggle for Identity, the Struggle for Somebodyness. Please place your order. And before we go, I want to share a few things that we have going on. If you have been inspired or informed by this conversation, I want to invite you to our 4th Carolina Prophetic Gathering that we're having here in Charlotte. Bishop Johnson is one of our speakers. It is going to be April 27th through the 29th. Our focus is being in sync with Christ, Galatians 5:25. You can go to Eventbrite to register, and I'll drop that link in our chat so you can have that as well. And again, save the date. Registration is open, and we look forward to connecting with you with this conversation, with the presenters and the dialogue that's going to take place. And again, if you want to change direction, change the conversation, you want to change the conversation, change who joins it, focus on the dialogue, come let us reason together. And so this is what this is going to do for us. So I just want to invite you to that. I also want to share with you as well that I am having my business, Brown Resources. We're having the Change Experience, a virtual masterclass. I'm going to be sharing on March 11th in my virtual masterclass, The Servant Leader in an Age of Chaos and Collapse. And so we want to have some thought leadership. If you're a counselor, if you are a coach, if you're a consultant, if you're a servant leader, this particular masterclass and thought leadership will help you lead through chaos and collapse, facing and understanding the realities of the times. And it's for those that you're perhaps providing coaching, counseling, or consultation to others to develop contextual leadership understanding. And so I'll also drop that particular link in the chat with you as well. So I just want to share those with you because we got a lot of contents going on. If those that are out there, let me know what your takeaways are for tonight. We got a lot of comments coming in, Bishop, again. Again, thank you everyone for coming on. You're most welcome. We appreciate you being a part of our dialogue tonight. Tell us a few things that you're taking away from this. Please share. Yes, we can breathe. Absolutely. Thanks everyone for coming on, being a part of our dialogue this evening. This has been incredible. I wanted to, since we're in the spirit of Black history, I wanted to bring up a fun fact this evening, and I want to share that before we leave. And that fun fact is my dad, Dr. Paul C. Brown. He was the first African-American president of the American Medical Technologists Organization. So this is a Black history moment. Here's a quote from Dr. Brown, and I want to acknowledge my father tonight. In pursuit of excellence, one needs to appropriate the principles of the trade and do with integrity, honesty, and humility. Keep pressing. He was the first elected African-American president of the AMT organization, which stands for American Medical Technologists. Their focus is certifying excellence in allied health. They have over 100,000 AMT certified members, over 11 recognized certifications in all 50 states and abroad is recognized. And they encourage healthcare professionals to verify their skills and their competencies. And so he has been involved with the organization since 1985 or so, and he served as the president of that organization, the first African-American elected president between 2007 and 2010. And he served on the national board for 9 years as well. So I know I'm not sure if Dad is out there watching tonight, but I wanted to recognize again my dad in his fun fact, Black history moment, Dr. Paul C. Brown, first African-American president of the American Medical Technologists Organization. So history in my own backyard.
We salute him. We salute you, sir.
Yes. So I'm so excited and grateful. Bishop, this has been amazing. And thank you for coming on this evening and being part of the conversation. And again, I want to remind everyone, please ensure that you order his book, The African-American Struggle for Identity, the Struggle for Somebodyness. Thank you so much, Bishop.
Have a great night.
Okay, you too. Thank you so much. All right, everyone, this has been an incredible dialogue. And again, Bishop's book. Grateful to have this time of conversation and insight. And again, want to remind you of what we have going on here. March 11th, the Change Experience Virtual Masterclass, the Servant Leader in an Age of Chaos, and also our prophetic gathering, April 27th through the 29th. Please save the dates. I will post those links in the comments as well. And next week, I will have another guest, Dr. Sandy Burkett. We're going to be talking about her new book, The Lie Your Life is Built On. You definitely want to be a part of this conversation next week. I'm excited about it. And again, from my heart to yours, this is about Change Matters, conversations in creative spaces. And we look forward to having a time of conversation again with you real soon. Have an incredible evening. Change Matters.